I'm Johnny, and it's great to have Laurence again. Laurence Munoz with us.
Munoz, yeah.
Munoz, yeah. From Lyon in France. So, Laurence, what have you been doing the last month during this crazy time?
Yeah, well, hello everybody, and it's really nice to be with you again this month. I'm excited to hear about what Jeff is going to share with us. And in Lyon, it's really sunny but cold, and so we've been giving food to the homeless in the streets because there's more and more needs in this big city. And we also started Bible distributions in our little suburb. And so we're trying to give 2,000 Bibles in each home for this year of 2021. So good challenges.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Okay, and you've started a YouTube channel. I think some people will have seen Laurence, and the Lyon team is known for their kind of street art and really connecting with people through the arts, and especially people on the streets. And so you've started a YouTube channel with kind of dance and stuff.
Yeah.
Is that right? Yeah.
Yeah, like I'm taking classes online with dancers from Los Angeles, and I decided to start this YouTube channel because we can't really perform in the street as we were used to because of the COVID situation. Mm-hmm. So I just wanted to share with via the networks, social networks, to share a bit what I'm doing. And so I'm trying to improve myself and to share my faith and some values from dance. So you are welcome to visit my channel.
Yeah. So I think Belinda will put it up in the chat. So
yeah,
it's just
the beginning. There's just 3 videos on. So
yeah. Just a reminder, if you're watching, you're welcome to type in questions that you have. And so, yeah, I put a web, and I think Belinda put a link to the Guardians of the Flame that I'm also involved in putting on a bunch of podcasts. So it's, check that too if you want. But the main job we're here for today is to do our monthly leadership lounge. And I'm not going to say a whole lot right now about the leadership learning community. I know many of you have checked out the resources. Next week, we'll be doing a drop-in discussion. The week after that, a wrapping up of the week. There's a couple of LDX talks this month on the subject of community. Jose and Rosanna in London, and myself and my wife here in Rostrevor. There's a couple of articles that are written every month. So the theme this month is authentic community. How do we create authentic community? And so Laurence and myself, I think part of what this is, we're a good team today, is that Laurence is coming from an urban context, small team, engaging with the spheres, out and about. Whereas I'm on a bigger YWAM base. We have a big building, we have a big kitchen. So community looks kind of different in that. And so it's a real privilege for us to be able to interview Jeff Pratt today. So maybe I'll just quickly introduce you, Jeff, and then I'll hand over to Laurence to ask the first question. So everyone, this is Jeff Pratt. Jeff is going to tell us a bit more about his work. He's been in YWAM for many years. He's spoken in over 100 countries. He wrote a book about a year or two ago called The Homeward Call. I encourage you to check that out and look him up, his website. Jeff, if you Google Jeff Pratt YWAM, you'll come across him. And Jeff's, I guess, his primary kind of platform in the world is the Axiom, the global Axiom monastic community. And he's a YWAMer, and Axiom has emerged out of YWAM and is still kind of intersects with YWAM, but is probably even bigger than that. So we'd love to hear about that. But I think you're someone, Jeff, who really is someone in YWAM today who I think brings the beauty of communities down through the ages, from St. Francis all the way to DTS dorm rooms.
Thank you.
So we are looking forward to hearing what you've got to say.
Thank you, Johnny.
Yeah, great to have you.
Thanks.
Okay, Laurence.
Yeah, so Jeff, our first question to you is, we wanted to know more about you personally as well. So I wanted to ask you if you could tell more on how you met Jesus and
All right.
your personal testimony, and maybe a little bit of your journey with YM.
Okay. All right. Well, Laurence, the first memory I had of a real specific encounter with Jesus is when, as a Mormon priest, 16 years old, in Northern California, I was speaking in front of a group of a couple Mormons, or something that you do as a priest occasionally. And I was asking the congregation to imagine that there are three people being interviewed to get into heaven. And the first person walks into the room, and the interviewer says, "Tell me everything you know about Jesus." And this person gives all the correct dates, when Jesus was born, when he died, why he died. And the interviewer said, "Everything you said is true. It sounds wonderful, but is there not one thing you're forgetting?" And the person being interviewed shook his head and said, "No, I've told you it all." And a look of sorrow and pain passed the face of the interviewer. And he said, "Well, step into the next room." And then that person left. And when the second person to be interviewed entered, it was the same question: "Tell me everything you know about Jesus." And this person was a woman, so of course she knew more than the first person being interviewed, the man, right? And she knew all the theologies. And the interviewer was excited and said, "Yes, everything you said is true. But is there not one thing you're forgetting?" And he looked deep into her eyes with just a longing. And she said, "Sorry, I've told you everything." And then she left. But when the third person walked into the room to be interviewed and saw the face of the interviewer, he fell on his knees and began to worship him and say, "Oh, my Jesus, how I've longed to see your face." And I looked across the congregation and said, "Brothers and sisters, we as Mormons, if Jesus were to walk through the back door and come in to sit amongst us, would you and I even recognize and know him? Or do we know all about Jesus, but have no relationship with him?" And that was the cry of my own heart. And as I said that, I remember even sensing the Holy Spirit there, and people would nod their heads like they were aware that we all kind of had a knowledge of Jesus without relationship with him. So that started me on a pilgrimage as a 16-year-old of getting to understand what it means to know God. That till I was 18 or 19, I never really made that complete surrender. So Laurence, that was kind of the beginning of just an early memory of being awakened to the cross, to Jesus, to the difference between knowing about him and knowing him. And I would say it was just a couple years after that, when I was about 23, at a Keith Green memorial concert, when Melody Green was speaking at the end. She shared Keith Green's last message was, "Jesus commands us to go." And those memorial concerts that I know Dave Christofferson and a number of YLM leaders helped put together, where I believe around 100,000 people committed their life to missions through those concerts. That was one of my moments of surrender, of just not wanting to lead a regular life, but to be rooting for the ordinary. And I wanted to do that out of America and have a fresh new beginning where nobody knew me. So I decided to take my DTS in Maui, Hawaii, Suffer for the Lord in Maui, Hawaii. And that was the first DTS there. And that's where I started my journey with YWAM.
Thank you. Wow, it's a beautiful testimony, and it's always encouraging for us to hear how we meet Jesus and we fall in love with him. So thank you for sharing a bit.
You're welcome.
Yeah, there's one thing that I'm very interested in hearing your experience. Us in YM Lyon, we started the base in 2009, and during many years we tried to be a normal base, have staff, running schools, buying a building, and it really never happened the right way. And because we always had tensions in trying to be in the spheres, and some of us had part-time jobs, And so it never felt right. And I'd like to know more about your experience, how you moved to a traditional base in Texas to starting something new in Connecticut.
All right. Okay.
Yeah.
It's a real good question, because we were in a very traditional base. It was a Mercy Ship training center at the time when Mercy Ships was part of YWAM. And living in the Bible Belt, I had already helped Melody Green lead Last Days for a season, had already worked on staff in Maui, Hawaii for a couple of years, and had led numerous DTSs around the world. But moving from a Bible Belt where we felt we were to go to a region in the States and not go on outreaches any longer, but live on outreach, have that kind of mentality. We felt we need to make room for both singles and marrieds. And there was about 30 of us who were the original pioneer team that left the Bible Belt and Mercy Ships. And after scouting out different parts of America as to where to move, we decided the Yale University town in New Haven, Connecticut would be an excellent place for us to establish community amongst just the heartache of what we called at that time. And the Y2K year was our moving year. And everyone was saying, Jeff, in our team, you really want to make a move with all these families and kids from a very established ministry to a pioneering one during this, when Y2K happens. And you and I both know it was a big nothing, but it made us really pull together and trust and believe that we can create something beautiful. So I would say the first kind of pioneering heads up we received, both looking at scripture and through prayer, is really trusting and believing God for a man of peace in the New Haven area who could help open doors for us. That man was Brian and his wife, Candy Simmons. Brian Simmons is the translator of the Passion Bible. Since then, he helped open doors for us. But Laurence, we wanted to create a community of both those who felt called to communal living, and that model, as well as those who could still have part-time jobs. So I think what we felt we needed to do to make space for that is come up with three or a couple of mutualities, things in common that would hold both the full-time worker as well as the part-time YWAM worker together, so we're after the same end. And those mutualities, I'd say we didn't do that good to begin with. We found out many people were joining our ranks because maybe they're frustrated from the YWAM base of the community that they were at. They wanted what they called real, authentic community. Now, this was about 20 years ago. And so they came and joined us. And I think one of our biggest mistakes right off was being more known for what we were against in the traditional YWAM models that we didn't like, instead of being known for who and what we were for. So the mutualities we came up with over those first couple years, that one of our Axiom originators, Dr. Michael Jazz, helped us come up with, it was a mutual Christ, mutual mission, and mutual rhythms that would help both the part-time worker as well as a full-time YWAM staff person have bearings that would hold us together. Because we found we were drawing people who maybe didn't have the mutual Christ in common with us, but they thought what we were doing looked so cool and trendy and untraditional that we started getting people that didn't have the core mutual Christ, that were maybe a little bit more may I use the term maybe universalist, maybe believing more that there are many, many ways to God. And so that proposed problems our first couple of years, and then having a mutual mission saying, okay, we're all about the same thing, going the same direction. It can look 1,000 different ways. So we had to explore and define what that mutual mission was. And then out of that came the mutuality of a rhythm that if you work at maybe a space music venue, We had seen the leaders of the Mighty Purple Band come to know the Lord while we were there. And we partnered with them and started a gathering on Saturday nights because we want to experiment with unique expressions of church and community there in New Haven. So we found with people coming and going all the time, if we didn't have a mutual spiritual rhythm that was fluid enough for everyone to do, then there was no core, anything that held us in commonality together. So coming up with mutualities that we could all say, we're all about this. These are non-negotiables. I wish we had started with that, but hey, we evolved and learned along the way.
Yeah, it's a long process, you know, sometimes it takes years and years. Thank you. And what does, can you tell us more about Axiom? And well, first to start with, what does it mean, Axiom?
Okay. Axiom means the word, a self-evident, indisputable truth. And we believe our truth is the person of Jesus. As Thomas Merton, no, I think it was another writer, Augustine said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. And without a way, there is no going. Without a truth, there is no knowing. Without a life, there is no living. And we wanted a word that could define who our truth is. And so we chose the word axiom, so that pre-believers and people, maybe it wouldn't look too intentional and missional as a word. So if we would have an axiom get together, we can get all different kinds of people coming without feeling that what we were doing was conditional, that they listen to the gospel message. So we've grown comfortable with the word axiom, and our ministry website, Christ or Axiom, defines for people right off that it's the person of Jesus that we're all about.
Thanks, Jeff. We ask a question every week, every month on these lounges. What is one of your biggest mistakes that we could all learn from? So it's my favorite part of the show where I can sit back and watch. So,
well, when you said, what's your one biggest mistake? I mean, many come to mind. And I would say, in part, I answered that question in that I wish, well, they say in creating community, there needs to be a time of storming where you have to wrestle and fight out what you're about. I think a lot of us in the core leadership team of those who started Axiom were peacemakers by nature. We didn't like conflict. So I wish that we had allowed conflict and even had someone objective come in and help us be real, bottom line, honest with one another to begin with as we were pioneering. So that 5 years into it, where we had a real change and evolution, and that was maybe, I think, a little bit more sad and disappointing, could have been less so if we had allowed conflict originally and talked it through and came up with our mutualities the first maybe 2 years instead of 4 years into the journey, and not had the goal of maintaining or just keeping the peace, but finding really as individual leaders, what are we all about? Are we really in this together? And are we doing it for all the same reasons? Are we as like-minded as we originally thought we were? Having those kind of harder conversations initially, I think, would have protected us from disappointment down the road.
Thanks. There's probably a lot we could go into with that, because I think that idea of crucial conversations and conflict, the healthy benefit of actual, iron sharpening iron, and is good. I want to maybe just get to the crux of what we're really talking about this month and it's certainly in this interview, of creating authentic community. I wonder what your definition of authentic community is. And I know that you use a kind of a metaphor of a house with different rooms. I wonder if you could kind of go into that.
Right. Yes, I think over the years, again, often through our mistakes, I've learned in my mind to kind of map out what I would call the community house, which 10 years ago would have had less rooms in it, that now I see to be, if we're to be authentic community, that there are certain rooms we need to enter with one another. First, a quote that's meant a lot to us as axiom from Mother Teresa is this, and that is, if we have no peace, it's because we have forgotten that we belong to one another. In creating authentic, like a healing community that belongs to God and one another. If we're an authentic faith community, I believe we do need to have a mutual mission, a mutual Christ, and a mutual rhythm that are habits and disciplines that reflect our values. I think we don't have habits and disciplines as communities that reflect our values, then we're known more for what we believe and lose and miss out how to believe. And thus, to be a distinct light in the world, we will not be unless we walk through what I see, these rooms of an authentic community house. And I'd say the first room, the mutual mission and mutual Christ, lead us into the house. But I think the room of history giving, which I would define as having periodical intentional moments throughout a year where we're getting to know each other, to practice silence and solitude together. How we did this our first few years as Axiom is we made it for those both who worked, mothers who had kids we provide childcare for, and a couple times a year we would rent a retreat center and go out on a Saturday, send everyone out, kind of using Mother Teresa's words, unless we hear the stillness of Jesus in our hearts, we'll never be able to hear him say, I thirst in the heart of the poor. In the Yale University town, New Haven, Connecticut, there was the needy, the poor, as well as the highly influential. And as Jesus was in the marketplace of ideas, but also went where the pain was, we felt to be the presence of Jesus holding those tensions together, we needed to take time in silence and solitude together to go out and be alone with God and then come and share what we've heard. What pains and questions are we encountering? To stay in touch with each other's hearts, to create a fellowship of the heart, history giving, because we're all learning, growing, and changing. Once we lose touch of each other's hearts, I think we're not able to give an authentic Christ to the world. So that first room of history giving, and to create space for that, where we continually unravel our stories, I think is essential. And then I think visiting the room of commitment, confession, confrontation, the 3 C's. And again, the mistakes we've made is when we've lived without this room, is when maybe we required from our staff a vulnerability that didn't match our level of commitment. Talking about what our expectations are and what it means in regards to friendship with one another and the cause of the gospel. What are we doing in New Haven together when those who are not working full-time can kind of feel out of touch? So caring enough to confront, and again, creating space where we wait on the Lord and we're able to have the space to go to one another and to share and to keep short accounts. Next to that room would be affirmation. And the Bible says, encourage one another while it is today. And if we don't make that space for the mutual encouragement of one another, it's really not going to happen. And one time, I know Wick and Niece came and joined us for a season. And I remember Wick and one of our friends from England, Micah Jazz, when we were in a time of really allowing certain people to move out of the YWAM context. We had Love 146 was no longer wanting to be a Christian ministry, wanted to be a charity. That was around 2006. Now they have safe houses all over the world. And President Clinton came to the 10-year anniversary, but they felt a different call in a different direction. It was challenging for us to walk that through, letting certain ministries go, take on different shapes and blessing, and being okay with that. And so I think with Wick and Nieces and Dr. Micah Jazz input, we realized we were getting a bit serious and not having a playroom in our community house. And he says, we need to intentionally move from the table to the pub. A community that plays together is a community that stays together, not only prays together. So we were making space for the prayer. We started making time for the honest conversations, but we just needed to make space to just be human and enjoy one another. Why we originally decided to work together in the first place. When things got intense, we would forget that. So we saw the community playroom. We can just go on the Yale Green and have some fun. Was something, again, I wish during those serious seasons of evolution, we would have intentionally practiced more. So that's a rough with the community house. The playroom, the affirmation, the confession, confrontation, and history giving, I see to all be rooms that we need to, as we create authentic community life, be intentional to give time for. And I say give time for because we're all so busy. But to me, if we're not intentional with creating community space to go to those rooms, we may be more in love with the idea of authentic community than actually be practicing doing it at all.
That's really good. I hear echoes of Bonhoeffer in your last comment.
Right.
We can maybe come to that in a second. I mean, I think you said, you're just talking about community, and I think that's a really fascinating kind of paradigm to look at community through the lens of a house, and how in our bases and teams, and do we have these things? I wonder if, just to bring it into very directly kind of YWAM context, obviously people watching this, of like Laurence and Leon, the small teams, some are living in big bases, big buildings. The YWAM model, the YWAM is so big. I wonder what some of the ways, when you look at in a healthy critiquing way of YWAM, what are some ways that we fail when we say, we always say as YWAM, one of our big things is community. People love DTS because of community. It is, I think, at best, YWAM can have beautiful community, but I think we can also really get it wrong and really be missing some of the richness. What would you, in a healthy kind of critiquing way, say that where we fail sometimes is YWAM in community?
I think because I've had the privilege of dabbling in many different streams of YWAM community that all felt very unique. For example, the Mercyship model, when it was part of YWAM, was more of a professional business 9-to-5 model. I saw strengths and weaknesses in that, but I thought what was beautiful for what the mission was at that time of Mercyship, what their mission statement and the kinds of people they wanted to hire, the whole mutual support, some making money at the time and some not. Embracing at that time that business model showed me the professionalism that is needed if we as community are interfacing and inviting the professional world to be part of who we are. If that is not part of our DNA, I think YWAM at times could be so sloppy and so unprofessional, which works when you're a little team in a village, and that is not part of the DNA of the culture of the area that you live in geographically, but doesn't work if you are living in a professional environment. So I think sometimes as YWAM, we could use our sloppiness and say we're relationally driven, and yet we're not reaching the spheres of influence in the cities we're in if we don't have some kind of professionalism we're operating out of. I'm talking mainly to bases who are maybe in or around urban centers. And again, that goes back, I think, a lot to what is our mission in that city. Now, speaking from my experience with mercy ships and then going to what I would say the opposite of that would be the wild and crazy Last Days Ministries, original founder being a Keith, a prophetic voice. And we lived in more of a communal setting, and except for the printing press, there was an element of professionalism when it came to how Last Days communicated through their newsletter and magazine at the time, and that was beautiful. But a lot of folks, the streets were not even paved. They were old dirt roads. And sometimes as a Last Days community, many of us would admit we were so insulated from the culture and the society of the day, we couldn't really reach outside of ourselves and could easily lose touch by being so insular and isolated that our perspective of what was happening in the world and how to be Jesus with skin on to those around us outside our community was almost impossible to be and to do. So those would be two extremes, kind of a mercy ship YWAM back when it was, to a Last Days Ministries that ended up later being a website-based ministry. So we dissolved that community of 150 people and end up selling the property to T-Mania at the time. So I'm not sure that answered your question, but anything you want to ask more along those lines, Johnny?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's really good. That's a good start, in terms of failings in community. I think one thought that comes to mind, building on your last comment, where you kind of were sounding a bit like Bonhoeffer. Dietrich Bonhoeffer. I know you know that quote from, I think, his book Life Together. He said, I'm sure you can probably say it, those who love their dream of community more than the community itself will kill community.
Right.
And I think I've seen that in YWAM over the years. You have these people who love the concept of community. I want to be in community. And then they see people not reaching their high ideals, and they start pulling the community apart because it's not like their perfection. Can you unpack a little bit of that? Because I know you've lived that out in reality.
Right. I think Ronald Royheiser wrote some beautiful books, some of them having to do with the very thing we're talking about. In that, to begin with, as we were creating community in the Yale University town of New Haven, and saw that one of the mistakes we originally made those first couple years is being known for more of what we were against than what we were for. And thus being a Christ-centered community and to give Christ away to the world. An analogy we ended up looking at and trying to practice was how could that, through just the elements of shared communion, which is still one of our global practices, is the partaking of the weekly Eucharist. How can we live the Eucharist life together and have our community reflect the values of what Jesus said when he said, "Do this in remembrance of me"? Because we found we were creating something, again, we had great music, it was cool and trendy looking, but was making maybe us feel good about what a community looked like, but lacked an understanding of what I would say the marrow of the gospel is all about. We wrestled so much with what to believe in our journey, the how to believe, how to access faith, hope, and charity, because we're sometimes weak at. So we went back to look at the practice of the Eucharist community, that originally it's learning about how to receive the life of Christ, and as individuals, as community together, how to break the bread, how to acknowledge brokenness in one another and make space and room to feel each other's sorrows and pains, and then how to freely give that to the world. And I would say one of my favorite quotes along that end would be from Henry Nouwen, who at one time lived and worked in creative community in New Haven. Says nothing is sweet or easy about community. Community is a group of people who do not hide their joys or sorrows, but make them visible to each other in a gesture of hope. In community, we say life is full of ups and downs, but we do not have to live it alone. We have to drink our cup together and thus celebrate the truth that the wounds of our individual lives, intolerable when lived alone, become sources of healing when we live them as part of a fellowship of mutual care. Mm. And when we made space weekly to have communion together, no matter how busy we got, some liturgical, kind of ancient ways of practicing it, and some very modern, but to bring our joys and sorrows out on the table together. Even Mormon missionaries, I'll never forget the day they came to our Willow Street door to share their gospel. And it was in the middle of us having the Eucharist and communion. Some of the Yale students who were living in one of our homes came to join us. And one of the missionaries I had already established a relationship with because I met him down on the Yale Green. Jesus was doing an awakening in his own heart. And when I said to him, he says, well, looks like we're bothering you. We'll come back later. And I says, well, we're just breaking bread together and drinking a little grape juice and wine and remembering the life and death of our Lord and talking about areas where we're struggling in the self and the ego to die, and kind of lay that on the table. Maybe you want to join us if you feel we share a mutual Christ and believe in the life and death and resurrection of our Lord. Maybe you want to come in and do that with us. And the one missionary said, well, I'm not really comfortable with that. And the other one that I built friendship with, he said, I'd love to come and join you. And to see him come in and us to break the bread and practice not only communion as an act and a practice, but inviting him with us into a way of life was a beautiful experience.
Wow. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks, Jeff. I went across your website and I saw that you were proposing many things, and I think your ministry is really large. So I wanted to ask you if you could give us more details on your community practices, rhythms of life, just to give us more details on this, please.
All right. Yeah, what holds us together is axiom monastic communities. And we use the word monastic. You can use, the word neo-monastic, new monasticism. But in looking at the word monastic, our translation regarding how we practice it is learning how to follow Jesus as a way of life. That's our aspiration. So what holds our network of both participants and individuals, as well as community, some of them are YWAM, some not, are 3 shared practices. And we have 7 practices that some of our communities fully do or may not do, but the 3 we hold in common is, number 1 would be daily moments of remembering and reflecting. And I find in our YWAM model of quiet time, a downside if we just use quiet time language. Sometimes the staff and students can feel that they've had their moment with God, and now the rest of the day they can go about their work. And we wanted to more create a culture of practicing the presence of God, of a culture of a realized union with Him that sustains a life of love and meaningful service. In order to be anchored in a realized union, we believe the shared practices help us live and breathe Christ as our life. So the daily moments of reflecting and remembering will resource individuals and communities around the world as to what that can look like with a Franciscan stream, the old Celtic way, just the beautiful colors of the different streams of Christianity, the Benedictine order. Let's experiment. Let's look at this together so that it never becomes boring and is vibrant and full of life. So we'll spend our time as spiritual directors resourcing our communities with what your daily moments of reflecting and how to live in a realized union with God, what that could look like practice-wise. And I think a recent book I'm halfway reading would be Renovated. God, Dallas Willard, and the Church That Transforms would be an example that of a book that some of us have been journeying through that has inspired different ways to look at the very thing that I've just said. So the shared practice of daily moments of remembering, reflecting is number one. Number two would be the weekly communion and exploring the many ways that can look like. And Johnny, I'll never forget the memory we had when we did our first Celtic pilgrimage at your base that you guys so graciously hosted for us. And I think Aaron Walker, I don't know if you're out there, but Chris, who's part of our network, met there and then later got married and have a beautiful little boy. But I'll never forget the Benedictine monks there, you know, the universal communion there on the border was one of the most beautiful experiences we've had with our Catholic brothers. That'd be our second practice and shared practice. And number three would be a yearly pilgrimage or retreat, or in evangelical language. What I mean by that, or YWAM language, would be a quality time a year with God where we reflect as to where we've been and where we're going. Mm-hmm. And we offer pilgrimages. And I know that Peter Warren's been talking about potentially having some of our North American YWAM leaders join us in an Assisi pilgrimage, exploring the awakening of St. Francis. And then the old medieval beautiful little town of Assisi, Italy. So those are our shared practices. But as a whole, body, mind, and spirit, we have 7 practices regarding body care and other elements that are values to us that are more optional practices that some of the communities around the world engage with and others may not.
Thank you. I can hear your passion when you share what you're doing, and it makes us feel like you're tasting, you know, what you're doing.
Right.
Yeah, it's like this verse that says, "Taste and see how God is good." So.
Totally. Laurence, one thing I want to mention just along those lines, is I think what initially inspired us regarding the pilgrimage concept and Science of Solitude retreats back in the mid-90s, as I had the privilege of getting to know Brennan Manning, who wrote Ragamuffin Gospel Signature of Jesus, and he was one of the original ones who we invited to come and lead us and to even disciple me in the mid-90s in how to create community space to explore God encounter together. And I remember one of those retreats, there was a woman who had only known Jesus for 3 weeks, and no one at the retreat knew that she had just come out of prostitution. One of the exercises was to send everyone on a mountainside and ask God, what do you feel about me? And then reconvene in a couple hours and share what you heard. And during that time where everyone reconvened, the retreat coordinator asked, let's just share what we experienced on the hillside. And this particular woman stood up holding a piece of paper, and she was shaking. She was so nervous. And she says, when I was on the mountainside, she goes, for one thing, you people is the first community I've ever felt a place of just peace and belonging. So I don't know if this is your God, but I was ashamed to ask God, what do you feel about me? Because I was a prostitute 3 weeks ago by choice, and could only imagine how angry God must be, even though I believe I'm his daughter. I have a life of shame. But when I asked God, what do you feel about me? She says, these words came to mind. And she looked around the room. She goes, you're like my new family community. Could I share what I felt God say? We said yes. Keep in mind, as she said these words, she didn't even know the book of Songs of Solomon existed. As she read off the paper, arise, my lovely one come. The winter is past and the rains are gone. The flowers appear, it's a season of song. My beautiful one, arise and come with me before the dawn breaks and the shadows flee. For you ravish my heart with just one look. Tears begin to stream down her face, and she says, is this your God? Did I hear right? And someone out of the crowd stood up and showed her those words out of the Songs of Solomon.
Wow.
And the Holy Spirit, the divine matchmaker, gave us all in community together. Passionate, glorious intruder, God, face to face in community, encountered, led through this new believer, was one of the most beautiful moments of belonging to God and belonging to one another.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you for sharing this. Wow. That's so deep. It's hard to go to the next question now, but I'm going to go anyway without any transition. In your website, you mentioned something, and I'm just going to read it because I think it was really interesting for us as YM. You said, Youth with a Mission had served as a good incubator for growth, but could not contain the various visions that had emerged. Right. And I think this sentence really attract my curiosity, and I think it's important for us to acknowledge that and to really ask ourselves the question: how could YM, as it's moving to YM 3.0 and wants to be more focused on the spheres, can be more prepared for this kind of growth?
Right.
Yeah, you know what I mean, how that happened for you, why it was difficult for you through the mission to contain these various visions, and that you had to start other organizations.
Right. And I think in 2006 is when we had a marked moment of change where a Love 146 wanted to become its own charity. I think a question we need to ask ourselves is YWAM Bases and Ministries is, I know Darlene's recent book regarding values, and can YWAMers be paid, business model regarding part-time jobs or not. I think at that time in 2006, there wasn't a lot of dialogue and answers that people agreed on in that arena. So a question we needed to ask ourselves at that point is YWAM meant to contain certain visions. I think Mercy Ships went through that change with YWAM and have their reasons for moving on. And for us, is going back again, and do we have habits and disciplines that are anchored into our values? Jeremy Price led 10,000 homes in South Africa and felt that we were creating something big in New Haven, and yet it took more management and structure to contain and to steer that than I and us team of overseers wanted to give. So we realized we needed to be open for healthy change. And YWAM wasn't meant to contain a Love 146 with their heart and their vision and how they wanted to engage with the secular world. This was a long time ago, 2006. But I think even where YWAM North America is, and maybe YWAM Europe, maybe are in the same place, but very well be in different places. Very, very topic we're talking about right now, which is a conversation for another time. But I think for us, we had to get back to the basic questions as to who are we called to become? Who do we love? Who are our long-term friendships and relationships that we can still see 20, 30 years from now? Revisiting what do we want out of this? And is it time, do we make something be part of YWAM just to stay in YWAM? I think sometimes getting caught up in YWAM terms, kind of like Christianese terms, sometimes is not helpful. And letting that language aside and being able to be free to disagree with one another and having those bottom line conversations with our overseers and leaders to pray with us, I think are something that's essential for us to do, to realize, is YWAM meant to contain certain vision or not? Jeremy Price felt to then launch out, instead of sending trips out with 10,000 homes to Cork there in northern South Africa, to move with his team there and start schools there. So by multiplying and releasing some of the communities to spread their wings and fly, some of them kept with our rhythms, and some of them didn't feel that was a necessity or that it reflected the values to where they were at in life. So some just moved on. Some of that felt right and good, and some of it was just painful.
Yeah, I really appreciate this conversation, Jeff, because I think you're unpacking, I think, the story through your story, the story of many YWAM works, you know, of sometimes the pain of building things and people leaving and conflict, and I just appreciate your faithfulness over the years of just keeping going. And you know, you mentioned Love 146. You know, I remember Rob Morris speaking and quoting you on the very first DTS I ever led, and I was like, I need to meet this guy Jeff Pratt someday, you know. But I mean, that's an amazing ministry Rob's got with women that are caught in trafficking. I also aware, as we're talking, every YWAM base in the world is different. We're linked by values, DNA, but we are different, you know. And even the way you using words like Eucharist and rhythms, it sounds quite Catholic, if you like, and I actually would love YWAM to learn more and to take on some of these words more. But one of the words or phrases you describe is that your network is a network of aspiring contemplative activists. And I think that's a great definition of what YWAM should be. Can you tell us, what does that mean, contemplative activists? You know?
Right. Well, I think the word contemplation, you look at the roots, has to do with slowing down enough to spiritually see what is real and what is not. And I think with YWAM, I see a movement in the mission to go back to slowing down, in a sense, to catch up with God. I see this movement in parts of the mission and in some parts and not at all. But to be slowed down to catch up with God, to acknowledge, slow down enough, as it says in Isaiah 6, when Isaiah went to the mountain to encounter God, to be sifted into stillness, to learn to hear the heartbeat of the risen Christ within us. When Isaiah went on the mountain and encountered the holiness of God, he first became self-aware. I'm a man of unclean lips. To be aspiring contemplatives, meaning we're slowing down enough to see our true selves and to live in a place of a clear conscience, a realized union with Christ. And as Isaiah saw, he was a man of unclean lips, immediate encounter happened. So a contemplative it takes time enough to acknowledge our false self and to confess and to experience that sacred space and place of encounter. Because here in the Western world, we live with distracted mind and cluttered hearts that have forgotten how to be still and know that he is God. Especially as YWAM leaders, we live with an addiction, sometimes the tyranny of the urgent. We're seldom awakened to the fact that every minute and every moment can be spent in the power and presence of God. And I love in Isaiah 6, where at the end, the Trinity says, who will go for us? And so contemplative activists are those who have made the sacred space to live that realized union and to understand the true seeing is the heart of spirituality today. Therefore, we desperately need some spiritual practices to teach us what to see and what we don't need to see. Those who God can most easily be lost by being thought found. Prefaced before any miracle are the words Jesus saw. And in a Western ghetto Christianity, we've taught our young people how to do without learning how to spiritually see. To be aspiring contemplative activists, you put your priority on how to see first. Then Jesus only did what he saw the Father doing. Can we as leaders slow down our pace enough? It says Jesus walked slowly through the crowd so that we can be trained to spiritually see. Then our doing will produce fruit that will last as activists because we'll stop for who Jesus wants us to stop for. He didn't heal everyone. So I think in general, contemplative activist is taking those two words and making sacred space to slow down enough that we can really see ourselves, see God clearly, and see his movements in the world clearly. So we can answer the call, who will go for us, whatever city we're at. That I see, that's what we aspire to be, is to our doing coming out of our seeing. And our pilgrimage and retreats are places of training for that.
That's really good, Jeff. I hope we can kind of grab a hold of this. You know, I mean, I think contemplation and action. You know, and why when we would prayer is often intercession, which is about doing. I know at the FutureWise gathering we did last week or 2 weeks ago, Brother Thierry from the Benedictines said, you know, Johnny's asked me to give you an exercise to do. And he said, I'm not, that sounds so Protestant. He said, I'm not going to give you something to do. I'm going to ask you to let the word work in you. And I do think there's something about that, stopping enough to let the word change us, to let Jesus change us. And I feel challenged by that. And I think you're bringing something really important for us. Yeah.
Oh, thank you, Johnny.
Laurence, you've got a question.
Yeah. Well, the time is going really fast, and what you shared is really important for us. And I think we have a lot to think about and brainstorm also. So thank you so much. And there's one question that we used to ask to the speakers is, what books would you advise us as YMers to read? Like maybe about the topic of an authentic community, or maybe other topics, but good books that you would advise us to read.
You know, I think how I'd like to answer that is, I've been reading a lot of literature. I think it would be probably less specific books, but more of a prophetic challenge I've experienced that could lead us towards a number of books. And the topic I'd like to mention here in closing is that of rewilding. A book called Rewilding the World by Carolyn Friesen, Rewilding Yourself, 23 Spells for Making Hidden Things Visible. 7 years ago, when I was with our communities in Harare, Zimbabwe, I had just gone on a lion walk with 2 wild lions, and this local took me on this vantage point. We were overlooking the savannah, and he said, "I am sad. My heart is broken. The elephants no longer come to this part of Zimbabwe. They don't feel at home here because we've over-domesticated the land. And we are in a rewilding project." The word rewild means bringing land back to its natural vital state. He goes, "We're rewilding the land in hopes that the elephants will return and feel at home here again." Right when he said that, I felt an ache, a conviction, the Spirit of the living God saying in me, that's how I feel about the hearts of my people. I no longer feel at home in many of my communities who bear my name, and many of my people, because Christianity has been domesticated. And most people would say, "Jeff, you lived a wild life, over 100 nations," but all of a sudden I was convicted by the own domestication in my own heart. So I've been in the last 7 years reading a lot of literature, actually working on a slow devotional, 90 days of rewilding heart, body, and mind, and what that looks like in the context of community. So that's what I would like to say regarding books, is that's been one of my courses of study, and my own rewilding journey has to do with the mind. So I've been rereading How God Changes the Brain, Andrew Newberg. So holistically, I just have been seeing this beautiful work in my own life for the past 7 years. So that's the reading and pursuits I would be on now.
Thank you.
Well, Jeff, so good. Can you stay for another hour? Or maybe we could go live with your DTS class in Boston. You know, I know the time is gone, and I know that you're in Boston and about to speak on a DTS in a couple of minutes, so we can't have much more time with you. Maybe there's a question actually from my mom, who's loyally watching.
Oh, wow.
But yeah, I think you met her in Hartford, then I think once.
Oh, awesome. Cool.
But maybe we won't do the question itself because it might take a while. But maybe you could write down, and I could put it in the comments. Okay. It's just about, she was asking about what she would love to hear the other 7 points of that you said weren't compulsory in the community, but they are optional. So maybe we could, rather than going into all of those, you could maybe send me a quick link or where we can find it.
I'll do that, Johnny. Awesome. You guys, I mean, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah.
Such a heart for the nations and all your ministries, and be spending more time in Europe, hopefully this fall. We were supposed to do an Assisi pilgrimage in May, but with my Italian brothers and friends, there, obviously, with the pandemic, there's going to be restrictions, and so we've pushed everything to the fall. But I'd love to meet more of you communities and folk out there, and would love to develop a friendship.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. I mean, we really appreciate your words today, and I feel it's like we've just scratched the surface, and I would love to hear some more in some form, in this learning community that we have. You've got a lot to share about community, and I think it's one of the areas is why we can be really good in, but we can really be lacking in, and I think we need help in it. So thanks for your service to YWAM over the years, and you're always welcome in Europe.
Thank you very much.
If you're watching, he's got his book, A Homeward Call, and check it out. And we look forward to seeing you in the flesh in Europe sometime, but also hopefully again in the European Leadership Learning Community virtually somehow.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Laurence. Very nice to meet you.
Thank you, Jeff.
Okay.
All right,
Jeff. We'll let you go.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. See you, Jeff. See you. Bye. Okay, and thanks. Laurence, great. That was a good interview. I feel like we could have gone a long time there, but thanks everyone for watching. Remember that we have on the website, register for the website, get on there, look in the resource section. You'll find LDX 10-minute videos, 2 this month on community, the challenges of community and ways to reach out in your local areas. Blog posts that are really good content to pass out to your staff. And our staff meetings here in Ross Trevor, we're often looking either at the LDX videos or watching one of these leadership lounges. So if you're a base leader, team leader, I encourage you to use this content, share it with your base or your team or your nation. And then next month we're going to be talking more about media and how media can be distraction and polarizing, but also how we can use media well, social media, etc. So, yeah, Laurence, thank you. I know your kids are going to be waking up from naps.
They just woke up.
Yeah.
They're coming down soon, so it's perfect timing.
Okay. Well, we will sign off there. So thanks, everyone, and we'll see you next month. Thanks,
Goodbye.
Laurence.